Hi everyone, Dr. Clark here. Here's part 2 in how to prevent ADHD. Remember, part 1 was avoiding tobacco exposure, moms avoiding tobacco exposure. Well, number 2 is avoiding lead exposure. Now, lead and the toxic effects of lead are fairly well known, but it is highly associated with kids developing attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. Now, many people incorrectly assume that lead is only, my kids only going to be exposed to lead if they're poor. Well, that's not true because houses built before the 1970s, there was a really good chance they might have lead paint. And that's really the number one source for lead exposure still today is old paint and paint dust. Now, something you might want to consider is getting one of those lead paint test kits. If you haven't done that, you need to do it. If you're planning on having a child, just go have that done. It's not expensive at all. So lead paint is a primary source of exposure for lead. Now, what does lead even do in the child's body? Well, lead competes for spots in enzymes with other minerals. So, for example, let's say that, here we go. Here's an enzyme. And let's see if I have something that can... So here's an enzyme. Hey, here's some stickers. This is great. Here's an enzyme. These guys right here, this is iron. Well, what lead does, lead comes in and goes, hey, I'll be there now. And so that enzyme can't work the way that it's supposed to. And that can have far-reaching effects depending on what enzyme we're talking about. But lead exposure is known to cause reduced intelligence and lots of other health problems. It can cause all kinds of horrible anemias. And it can be very bad. So it's something you definitely need to consider. It's not something from 10, 20 years ago and something you don't need to think about. It's a very real concern because paint, crumbling paint, paint dust is the number one source. Another source is dust. Dust contaminating soil. So, and where does this come from? Well, leaded gasoline. Gasoline in particular still has a little bit of lead in it, especially in some other parts of the world. But contaminated soil is another source of lead. There are lead test kits you can get for soil. Another, probably really the second biggest besides paint, is plumbing. Many cities still use lead pipes as connector pipes, and here's what you need to do. You need to probably just buy yourself a water filter. I like to tell people either buy a filter or be a filter, because you're asking your liver and your body to take that stuff out if you don't take it out before it gets in. So I don't have a recommendation. I certainly don't have a financial interest in anything, but get one. Get one that's tested and proven to take lead out, because it's just too easy to get around it, to take it out of the pool. Now, I don't recommend you use plastic bottles though, because I know a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to water filter. I'm just going to use these various plastic water bottles. Don't use those. Plastics have their own set of badness that can affect your developing child. Not to mention their endocrine disruptors. There's BPA, phthalates. In fact, there's a study that just came out of Europe that shows that certain ones, those little ones on the bottom of the bottles, those plastic bottles can leach antimony, which is a heavy metal. So don't even go to the plastic thing, but definitely avoid lead. I mean, that's the best thing I can tell you to do when you're trying to prevent ADHD is think about paint exposure, think about contaminated soil, and think about lead plumbing. So those are all things that you have a pretty good control over, and you can take measures. You can get lead abatement, you can buy a water filter, you can not drink out of plastics, as I was saying. And those are factors that are well known and that are correlated and connected to a child developing attention deficit disorder because it disrupts their entire body. Remember I said the enzyme thing? It disrupts their entire biochemistry. And it can cause a lot of health problems just through anemias and other things like that. So it's a real threat. It's not an old thing. It's something you still should be concerned about if you want to decrease the chance of your child ever developing that label of ADHD.